Hit it.
Welcome to the Test Talks podcast, the place to go to geek out on software testing. And now your host, whose mission is to help you succeed with test automation, Joe Colantonio.
Hey, it's Joe, and welcome to another episode of what used to be called Test Talks, still Test Talks, but will soon be called Test Guild Automation Podcast. In this episode, listen up and get an inside look in the life of Christian Bromann, the maintainer of WebDriverIO. Christian shares some pros and cons of using WebDriverIO and some extended debugging features he's been working on for the DevTools team at SauceLabs, plus a whole bunch more. Check it out. Test Talks is sponsored by the fantastic folks at SauceLabs, the cloud-based automated testing platform that eliminates the need to maintain your own Selenium grid and test infrastructure. Try it for free today. Visit testtalks.com and click on the Sign Up Now link under the homepage sponsor section. Hey, Christian. Welcome to Test Talks.
Hey, Joe. Nice to be here.
It's great to finally have you on the show. I've heard a lot about what you've been doing with WebDriverIO. I've been watching a lot of videos on you with doing presentations in WebDriverIO, Appium, and automation in general. So those are all the types of things I'd like to talk about today. But before we get into it, can you just tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Christian. I'm working as a software engineer at SauceLabs. I'm working here in the DevTools team. And that team is trying to build capabilities on top of WebDriver, which allows me to work on exciting things like extended debugging or performance testing, as you mentioned. I'm also the AC rep for Sauce at the W3C, so I'm representing the company in the standards committee. I'm also, as you mentioned, the maintainer of the WebDriverIO project, and I like to be involved in the overall foundation that is behind that project. As you mentioned, I like to speak on conferences whenever I have something interesting to tell. So that's me.
Very cool. So DevTools team, you mentioned you work on things like extended debugging. Is that what's built into SauceLabs? Do you develop that? Like, what's your involvement with that?
So the whole topic came up when I finished my college, and back then I built a driver for a smart TV that was based on the Chrome DevTools protocol. And I got really exposed to that protocol and learned a lot about things that it provides. And I try to apply that technology or that protocol to the offerings that we have here at Sauce. So with extended debugging, we created a different communication channel to the browser, to the Chrome browser, in order to allow us to get not only performance data, but also network activity and console log data for the customer. So that he has a better insight what is happening in the browser.
Very cool. And I think one of those new insights I think your team recently rolled out had to do specifically with performance testing. Is that correct?
Exactly. We recently released a new performance offering that allows customers to test the front-end performance of their application. So this is kind of difficult from usual performance tests, as you heard here in the industry, that are more related to load testing. And there are already a lot of great tools that you can do to load test your APIs and whatnot. But this is specifically designed for front-end performance testing, meaning it gives you an idea about how quick the application is being loaded, how quick it is rendered. It also gives you the performance score based on the Lighthouse calculations. So we use Lighthouse in all the great DevTools and Google technologies under the hood to give you the data that you would usually not able to get with just basic WebDriver.
So what's that data? There's certain metrics that you're able to pull out that WebDriver can't?
So as we have an additional parallel connection to the Chrome browser, we are able to control the communication between the Chrome driver and the Chrome itself. Which allows us to start tracing the browser and get all log information about whatever is happening in the browser engine from Chrome. And we use the tools that are provided by Google, like Lighthouse, in order to make sense of all this data, because it's those tracing log data that can be have a lot of payload. Like there can be files of 6, 7, 10 megabytes. you would usually not be able to use. So we use those tools to then get metrics like the performance score from Lighthouse, the time to interactive, first meaningful paint, those kind of metrics.
Cool. So you mentioned a lot of times there's tools out there that are made for performance testing. Why then should a tester care about performance testing rather than just say, oh, that's a separate team that handles that. I don't need to worry about it.
So it's all adds to the conversation of shift testing to the left. I mean, you could have a dedicated team that is only focused on performance, and some big companies have that. But if you want to provide value for your, quality assurance team, in order to, not only provide a functional test security, but also performance test security, you can just use the additional capability that we provide in order to have a second layer of testing, which is in this case a non-functional testing factor, which is performance.
Awesome. So Christian, it sounds like you do a lot of things at Sauce right now, but you also are the main maintainer of WebDriverIO. Like, where do you get the time? Like, how did you get involved with WebDriverIO? What's the backstory with that?
So the backstory, I think, started when I was in college. Like when I started college, when I started college, I think when my university teacher had this project for us, and we had to test it. This was one of the requirements back then, and it was a single page application. And I had a hard time to figure out how I write unit tests for this single page application. So I Googled around and found almost nothing on the internet, and then stumbled upon the project that was called WebDriver.js, which then was renamed WebDriverIO at some point later in time. But that project basically was one of the first Node.js implementations to run browser automation in Chrome and Firefox, I think, back then. And I used it heavily. And after I was successful using it, I continued contributing to the project because it kind of felt really interesting to contribute to open source and get involved into Node.js development. And that's how I started, learning about Node, learning about open source, and it made me a lot of fun. So I did that next to my studies, next to my other work that I do. And till today, I have a lot of fun working on this project.
Very cool. So I'm sure a lot of people always ask or are curious to know, like, when would they use one tool or implementation over another of a certain framework? So are there certain situations where WebDriverIO is like really made for, like it has a sweet spot?
Interesting question. I think every tool, as you mentioned, provides some advantages and comes also with some disadvantages. The things that I'm most proud of in the WebDriverIO community is the people behind the project, because there are some, for instance, this Gitter support channel where we have, I think, by now 4,500 people that help each other out constantly. Like we have people that are heavily involved on a daily basis. And it is really specific to one single project. So whenever you have some question there are definitely people that can help you out. And otherwise, I think WebDriver next to Protractor is one of the tools that give you a full-fledged framework to your hands. So it doesn't require you to implement anything that has been implemented before. It comes with all the things that you need to build a scalable and sustainable test suite. And there are a lot of people now that are constantly interested in evolving the project. And it's just fun to work with that.
Cool. So you mentioned it has a lot of built-in things for you, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. What features do you think most end-to-end testing solutions should include that WebDriver has?
So apart from many other opinions, I think reporters have to be really specified for end-to-end tests, because if you use a unit test framework like Mocker or Jest and want to run end-to-end tests with it, the reporters usually don't tell you which capability has been running that test. So it's really difficult to then figure out, hey, the test is failing, but which browser has failed my test? So I think reporters have to be really specific to end-to-end tests. And then another plugin or plugin type is a service, which is also kind of unique because it allows you to enter or to implement special functionality in the test lifecycle. Let's say you want to execute something before all tests run. You can do this with the on prepare hook. If you want to do something specific before every command or before every test or after every test and after every command, you can do that as well. And you can do not only like run specific code, you can have that code run in asynchronous fashion. So the test actually waits until that execution has happened. So it really gives you the opportunity, for instance, to put data into the database that is unique for your test case in order to test something. Or there's services out there that highlight elements whenever you interact with it. So there are a lot of opportunities that you can use in those with those kind of hooks.
Cool. So Christian, one of my pet peeves is like maintainers, main contributors to these open source tools. Obviously, I think they're the cream of the crop of automation engineers. So they know the things that automation engineers are struggling with. So I'm always curious to know why people blame the tools when their tests are failing. I think in one of your videos, Appium for Couch Potatoes, you mentioned that a lot of folks blame the tools when in fact it's something else that's causing the issues. In your experience, what are these other things that could cause issues rather than just blame the tool or the framework?
Yeah, in the end-to-end test world, I think we are testing a wide variety of components. It's not only the front end, the back end, and the database. It's much more. It's also the driver, the tool that we automate our browser with, and the browser itself. There are so many areas where a factor can happen that people that use those tools don't usually know where the error comes from. So, since you're using an automation tool like WebDriverIO to automate a browser and something fails, they only usually blame the automation tool because they are the opinion that, well, my application was working when I was developing that feature. So in the wide range of all the error areas that can happen, the decision to blame the error on the front end, on the framework that you use to automate the browser is usually always the first one, because it's the one that you don't know or that you have no influence on. And it's the one that usually promises you that whenever you use that tool and you say you want to click on the element, the click should work. But they totally forget that the click has to go through the whole browser engine, and the click has to also be worked through the browser driver that is automating the browser in the first place. So there are a lot of unknowns that the user usually is not exposed to.
So any tips on how to get to these unknowns of what actually caused the underlying issue? Is this built in? Like, does the DevTools, is this what they work on all the time to try to correlate it? If it failed, and here's why it failed, because of the network was slow or something like that?
I mean, they're like all those areas it's hard to figure out where those errors come from if you haven't seen them before, or if you don't have an idea where they could come from. The DevTools definitely can help us to make some sanity checks on specific things to identify the error area that WebDriver itself as a protocol could not provide us. So yeah, I'm one of the things that is happening in the WebDriver protocol areas that we now want to connect ourselves, or allow the front end, the automation framework, to connect to the DevTools interface behind the browser, which will help all these frameworks like Selenium or WebDriverIO to get more information out of the browser to make sure to give better ideas about where the error comes from.
Awesome. So how involved are you nowadays with WebDriverIO? I just saw an announcement fairly recently that a newer version came out. I'm always seeing updates from WebDriverIO. How many contributors are there to WebDriverIO?
So right now we have 4 or 5 people in the technical steering committee, and a bunch, like 20 people in we call it project maintainers. If you read over our governance model, you will see that we currently order our people or contributors to 2 categories. One are the project maintainers, and the other one are the technical steering committee. Becoming a project maintainer is pretty easy. You just have to show like some decent sort of interest into the project, and then you get like access to the repository, can help us triage issues and provide pull requests. And then the technical steering committee are usually members that have shown a lot of involvement and are then in the can then decide which direction we want to go. And we recently had our first technical steering committee meeting where we looked into all the areas that we want to explore in the project. And we found a couple of that are really interesting, which are, for instance, the DevTools service that we want to improve, which is similar as we had, as I mentioned before. It provides a second connection to the browser and allows us to do a lot of things on top of WebDriver. And that tool can really help us to improve the automation and allow, for instance, things like stubbing and mocking requests of the browser. That is usually a highly asked feature of people that do browser automation. And then we have other things like we want to provide a fiddle platform where people can put in their code and allow to share a reproducible example for the community or for their colleagues. And in general, provide the easier onboarding to the project by generating sample files that get you up and started pretty quickly.
Awesome. And I'm looking at the project roadmap, and it's pretty ambitious. Jest framework support. So how do you tackle this? Is it by committee by vote, or is it just someone has free time and they have an area they're interested in, so they'll start working on it?
Yeah, we talked about that in the committee, and we ended up saying, well, we have all these initiatives that we want to tackle, and whenever someone has time, he is welcome to help out on this. It's at the end of the day an open source project, and none of us is really full-time focused or earns money with that project. So we can only ask if anyone who wants to have time, who wants to learn Node.js, who wants to be involved with the project can help us out. So we don't have a real ordering. Everyone who is interested in any specific topic can explore it and help us moving it forward.
Cool. So Christian, you also mentioned that just recently that you were working on making it easier for people to contribute. And I think you even created you talked on this topic. What specifically is being done to make it easier for people to contribute? And do you think there's something now that's prohibiting people or making it harder for people to want to contribute?
I think one of the biggest achievements to make this easier was the move to a mono repo. So we moved all the WebDriverIO projects and all the packages that are contributing to your test run cycle into one repository, which makes it really easy if you have changes in multiple sub packages to see how this has modified the test runner or has modified the WebDriverIO itself. So having everything in one repo is helped a lot to simplify that onboarding process. And then we created a general governance structure that showed people how being involved into the project looks like and how I can be more involved into the project. And as you just mentioned, we built up a roadmap that shows where we want to go with it and where they can be involved. So this is also a big plus that helped us to get more people on board with this. And then one of my goals that I have for the future is, and I tried this before last year, I think, is to have onboarding sessions with people that are, that wants to get involved. So I would pair with whoever wants to pair with me on the project to fix a random bug or work on some new features in the project. And I would, put myself apart 1 hour a week and get that person trained up and work on him together on a specific feature.
Very cool. So how popular is WebDriverIO? Is it becoming more popular? Can you tell by the download numbers? Is it growing exponentially?
Yeah, I actually really know that because this is one of my things I take a look on every day almost because, if it's just for me, it's if I see that, the project is growing, then it excites me more and I'm more excited to work on this. So it is still I think Selenium is still more popular than WebDriverIO by far. And there's Cypress now that has, got more and more traction into the automation space. And that is exciting. So I think besides Selenium and Cypress, WebDriverIO is at least in the JavaScript area, one of a more popular framework. Yes. So
there seems to be a lot of NPM packages that can help you with the automation. Are there any other packages you think engineers should know about?
In terms of automation or in terms of browser automation, I think there are a lot of other projects that allow you, at least in the Node.js world, that allow you to automate the browser. But I'm not aware of any. Like there are, of course, the Selenium bindings that you can use to automate to build your own test suite. There are sub projects like I think Nightwatch.js are there. I heard not good things about Protractor, unfortunately. So it seems that project is not being maintained. And specific for Node, I heard a lot of small projects, but none of which that have like a high development velocity.
Yeah, I heard the same thing with Protractor. I heard it's good for small projects, but people weren't wowed by it.
It apparently is still used internally at Google, but there's no one really from Google who's continue working on it.
So I guess that leads to maintainer burnout. Is what I'm thinking is how do you avoid maintainer burnout? Because it seems like you've been doing this for a while. You're obviously a busy guy. You do a lot of sessions. You travel around the world. You work with Sauce. So like how do you avoid maintainer burnout?
Good question. I think one of the things is that I often set myself self apart from the project. So there's times where I don't even look at it for a while, like for a day or two, in order to get a little bit, space. And then I'm always trying to find new exciting things that I can build with that framework and, with that tool to help other people or to help people in new ways to improve their lives in the QA world or in the dev world. So I'd always try to find new challenges around the project that help me to continue to stay exciting. But as part of, in the support channel, I often, find myself don't giving the appropriate answers when I have to. And that is something that I have to work on. And I have to, this I think will train me in my career to be always, self-sustain and always looking at myself and how I give answers. So those are things where I also try to improve myself.
So I'm also curious to know, like a lot of times people don't contribute to open source projects. And so I think if more did, less people would get burned out and wouldn't be just on a few committers. I think this would open up a lot of doors for people that are contributors. Maybe I'm wrong, but is this, by you contributing to WebDriverIO, is that what brought you to the attention of SauceLabs, or is it just because you worked on WebDriverIO, you started having relationships with people and then started recommending you for jobs like at Sauce?
So yeah, this project literally opens all the doors that I currently have entered in my career. I mean, starting with working on the project, I approached Christian, who was back then engineering manager at Sauce, and he gave me the internship to work for Sauce during the summer. So that got me the job at Sauce in the first place. While being at Sauce, I was able to join the W3C and was able to contribute with my ideas by having the knowledge that I got from working on the project. And last but not least, since I contributed the project to the OpenJS Foundation, I'm now able to help building up a foundation that is the umbrella on so many great open source projects. And with that, you meet so many great people that have the same passion as you do. So I always recommend everyone who's, who's currently in college or already graduated or has already his career and never worked on open source, that that is one of the things that can really help you to do whatever you love in the software engineering area or in tech in general.
Yeah, very cool. I was at SauceCon this year, and it seemed like a lot of new hires of people that have been working in the community for a while. So it's like almost in your best interest to contribute to open source, even though there may not be monetary value. That actually, I think, is in the back end if people realize just with the kind of contacts you make.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a lot of questions if I would, open a fundraiser for the WebDriver project. I never was like, this project should never give me any monetary incentive. It always should give me incentive to or interest in, communicate with people and help people out in order to find new challenges around browser automation and test automation.
Very cool. As I mentioned, we were able to speak a little bit at SauceCon this year. There were a bunch of different announcements. Is there anything that you were excited about? I know the performance piece was one of them. Was there something to do with headless? Did you work on the headless technology that they came out recently with?
I've not personally worked on it. I think headless is still a really exciting project because it, lowers the cost of running tests in the cloud and scaling up your test suite and browser automation framework. But I think there are currently still challenges around how we leverage that platform in order to be really efficient. I've been working with the project manager on an example where I was spinning up like 100 browsers, headless browsers at once, and watching my project. So whenever I do a change, it would run on those headless container without having to recreate the session. So that allowed me to really run end-to-end tests at the speed of unit tests almost. So there are a lot of interesting challenges around there. And I think next to headless and performance, there will be new exciting things that come out from SauceLabs, and I'm really looking forward within the next quarters.
So Christian, does the DevTools team actually use WebDriverIO to test what they're developing? Like, do you use the tools themselves when you're working at Sauce? Like, do you use WebDriverIO to help you with your day-to-day job on the DevTools team?
Yes, we use WebDriverIO in order to test our drivers internally. So we have we don't use the Chrome driver that you can download from the project page. We have our own Chrome driver, our own wrapper around Chrome driver that is managing the connection to the browser. And like any of the drivers, we have to test this driver really carefully. And we heavily use WebDriverIO here to make sure that whenever we release this driver, that our customers have that the tests of our customers don't start to fail.
Okay, Christian, before we go, is there one piece of actionable advice you can give someone to help improve their WebDriverIO automation testing efforts? And let us know the best way to find or contact you.
So the best way to find and contact me is over the Gitter support channel that we have for the WebDriverIO project. You find this on the website. And the best way to improve your skills in WebDriverIO or browser automation in general is to start contributing and being involved into the projects, because it also not only teaches you how the project how the framework works itself, it also shows you how test automation works in general. And that is something I always advocating for. That is really important if you want to find the errors that are hidden in all these areas, if you want to spot them, and if you want to find out where they come from in order to quickly fix them.
Thank you, Christian, for your automation awesomeness. For links to everything of value we covered in this episode, head on over to testtalks.com/261. And while you're there, make sure to click on that sign up for a free trial link under the exclusive sponsor section to learn all about SauceLabs' awesome products and services. So that's it for this episode of Test Talks. I'm Joe, and my mission is to help you succeed with creating automation awesomeness. As always, test everything and keep the good. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Test Talks podcast. Head on over to www.testtalks.com for full show notes, amazing blog articles, and other automation awesomeness.